Over the past few years, two specific projects really pop into my head. The first one was a project that we did about David HaMelech. As we were learning the Sefer, we really wanted to help the students feel an appreciation for who David was. So I came and I talked to Mrs. Spolter and we tried to figure out how to do it. And we decided that the best thing would be to create David through negative space, based on the idea that a person can't really be defined by who he is, but rather that certain actions can give an indication or an understanding and sort of form how we understand a person. So each student took a different midrash or a different incident that we had already learned in the Navi, and they illustrated it on a piece of cardboard which fit together. They all fit together somehow, and they created in the middle, through empty space, sort of this picture of a king, which and we discussed a lot how we understand a person and how somebody's actions relate to who they are and how they sort of explain who they are. So that was very successful. We repeated that project many, many times since then. Another project that we did several years back was about Shemitah. Living in America, we're very removed from all of the realities of Shemitah and how it really affects people on a day-to-day basis. So we did something with a little bit of drama. Mrs. Fruchter role-played several different people who were living in Israel and dealing with the Shemitah year from a different perspective. I think there was a grandmother on a kibbutz, a non-religious Israeli kid, and a religious Israeli farmer. And they each explained some of the challenges and questions that they had about Shemitah. And in turn, the students had to respond to them, to each one of these people, and really discuss with them and help bring out who they were and what they were doing. And again, that generated a lot of excitement and a deeper understanding and appreciation for what happens during Shemitah.
We do drama games. One game like a hot seat, where a student sits in the seat and they are a character from the story, and the students and I have to ask this person questions where the answer isn't obvious. Moses, how did you feel when you found out you were Jewish? It doesn't say. So the student has to use whatever he or she has gathered from the text and to really, really be creative in how he or she expresses himself or herself and really get into the person.
A project I do at the end of Kings is that after we have studied all the miracles of Elijah, the students are then asked to put together a booklet or a PowerPoint or a collage of all of the miracles of Elijah, so that, again, it helps them to remember the miracles, it helps them to see the particulars of the miracles, and using different medium, it helps those students who can't focus on the text have a more positive experience.
What we are doing, we let the kids choose a pasuk that they want to do the art on. So we don't tell them which pasuk to take or what to do. They take a pasuk and they express the pasuk in art way.
The children choose which media they would like to work with. There is also a media that taps into your intelligence in terms of do you understand concepts. It's not only the arts. So a child chooses the media that he's most comfortable with. For instance, we have the use of clay, we have the use of Lego, we have the use of crayons and magic markers, and we have musical instruments. We have, with the musical instruments, they could set a tune to the pasuk. They can also use movement and act out the pasuk and dramatize. We have plays where the children organize into groups and dramatize the parak.
I teach students what it might feel like to be a Hebrew slave through the use of poetry. We create dramatic monologues based on a verse from the Torah. For example, Moshe comes to the Hebrew slaves and says, "You're going to be redeemed." The Hebrew slaves can't heed Moshe because of shortness of breath and hard labor. So I ask students, well, what work are you doing? What kind of work are you doing as a Hebrew slave? And they say, I'm a midwife. I'm a brick worker. I have mud up to my elbows. I'm sweeping the streets. Egyptians keep throwing dirt back in the street, and I keep sweeping it again. I'm hauling big, heavy stones from the desert. I see my destination miles off. So we do a kind of dramatic beginning, and then I say, well, what does Moshe's voice sound like? And they'll think of a metaphor. Moshe's voice sounds like a small victory. Moshe's voice sounds like static on a radio. Moshe's voice sounds like a bird flying overhead. I don't have time to listen to what he has to say. I have a lot of work to do. So they go through that process. And then after that, I say, okay, use your five senses. What do you hear? See, taste, smell, touch, and write. And I just let them write as much as they can, and it ends up being a dramatic monologue in the voice of a Hebrew slave. And this is something I feel that they can hone and shape. And then we go to the next pasuk, and let them add more to their monologue. But that's at least the beginning of how we do it. And hopefully it'll be something for them to share at their Seder.
One situation where I used film when I was teaching Tannach was discussing the story of Shaul. Shaul is a tragic character. It really follows the typical Greek tragic storyline, where we have somebody who has accomplished so much and had so much potential, and they suddenly had everything fall out from under them because of a character flaw. And I wanted my students really to feel that and touch that and pick up on the fact that these themes are sort of timeless and come up throughout several media, different types of media, in a lot of different ways. The example that came to my mind specifically when I was learning Shaul and getting ready to teach was King Lear. And that was a very meaningful and moving story to me growing up. And I wanted the students who were younger, these were 12 and 13-year-olds, to really pick up on the tragic fall. And obviously we weren't going to read through King Lear in the middle of a Navi class, but I wanted them to see that same tragic collapse comes across in film as well. And I was looking for, again, more of an artistic expression of that could really bring that across, and might also pick up on some of the feudal fighting that went on during those times between the different tribes that Shaul was dealing with. And I came across Kurosawa's Ran, great Japanese director. And again, it was a long film. I picked out specific scenes, and it really captures the tragedy of an emperor who has totally lost his mind, very much like Shaul to some extent, in the story of Shaul, and really it brings across and expresses the tragedy of a person, but then also of humanity in general.